This episode is graciously sponsored by NordVPN. Lately, have you been feeling unfulfilled in the bedroom? Is your me time in the living room just not enough of a release anymore? We have all been there, and it's not your fault. Sometimes our current streaming options just don't do it for us. Diversify your entertainment options safely, legally, and securely with NordVPN and its ability to route your IP address through almost any country, relegating streaming limitations to being an archaic concept. For example, if I need some fresh movies in my life, but I don't feel like purchasing a whole new streaming service to do so, I just use NordVPN's one-click connect on my phone or computer to connect to, say, a UK server, and bam, a whole new world of shows and movies are at my fingertips. If I'm not trying to fool a website's location tracker for television or shopping deals, and I just want to browse my normal content securely and without privacy concerns, I use Quick Connect to find the closest and fastest US server and browse without fear of privacy breaches or data mining. This holiday season, get a great deal by going to nordvpn.com/merc to get a 2-year plan at a huge discount, plus 1 additional month free. LA Emo was a 20-year-old woman who lived with her mother and 3 brothers in Kemi, Lapland, Finland. She studied at the Kemi School of Economics and worked part-time as a business assistant in the wallpaper and paint trade. On December 7th, 1955, Ellie went out with her friends Mila and Annalisa to the city center. The 3 went to the Makatluva Cafe and did some window shopping afterwards. They then went to the Valio bar. At around 9 p.m., Mila told her friends that her feet were freezing and it was time to head back home. Ellie and Mila lived close to one another. They said goodbye to Annalisa and headed home together. Along the way, 2 teenage boys, about 12 to 14 years old, offered to escort them, but the girls turned the boys down. The 2 walked along Lapintai Road and reached Ellie's home. Mila, however, asked Ellie if she could walk a little farther with her towards her home. Ellie agreed and walked 250 meters with her to Lapintai Road and Riski Kon Kato intersection. Both parted ways and Ellie headed back to her house. She would never make it back home. Ellie's mother returned home from work shortly before midnight. The front door of the house, which led to the downstairs and the upstairs apartment, was unlocked. However, this was not unusual as the neighborhood was considered to be safe. The upstairs apartment was occupied by a tenant. Ellie's brothers were sleeping downstairs when her mother arrived home. Ellie's bags, containing her school books, were on the living room floor, and some of her books were on the table. Her mother figured Ellie had studied before heading out. She wasn't worried that Ellie wasn't home this late at night, as she sometimes spent the night at Annalisa's home. The following day, at 12:50 p.m., however, a schoolboy found Ellie's body next to Lapintai Road. She was found just 30 meters from her house. She was found face down, and her body was partially covered with snow. An autopsy revealed that she'd been struck in the face and stabbed several times in the neck and behind her ear. She had not been sexually assaulted, and there was no sign that robbery was a motive. Ellie had been wearing her gloves, which were now stained with blood, as Ellie had ostensibly tried to grab the knife during the attack. Police found a sheath of a Mora knife at the crime scene. The murder weapon itself was never located. The police did receive a knife found on a bus, however, but it was never determined if it was the same knife used in Ellie's murder. Next to Ellie's body, police discovered footprints of a person wearing large ski boots. Police also found tire tracks from a bicycle next to a nearby bush. Police interviewed more than 60 people in the following days, but none were charged. The tenant living upstairs in Ellie's house told police that night she had heard a loud scream followed by a softer cry at around 9:45 p.m., and then everything went quiet. The tenant said she did not think much of it at the time. Police later found out that earlier that day, Ellie had had a fight with another student. LA had outed the student for charging extra money from the students for the class photographs, of which he was in charge. LA brought the matter to the student union, and the student was asked to pay back the extra money to the students. The student reportedly had written a letter to LA, which police later described as, quote, malicious. The student was questioned by police, but he had an alibi. Over the years, police interviewed hundreds of people, but none were ever considered a suspect. Police only ever named one suspect, Runar Holmström. Holmström had been charged for the Tule Latte campsite murders in 1959. Holmström was interviewed, but he denied killing LA. He told police that during the winter of 1955 and 1956, he was at his home in Munsala. He said he only left to visit a dentist. However, he was unable to remember the name of that dentist. He said he made the trips on his bicycle. Police also asked him about the Mora knife that he owned. He could only remember that he had received the knife in September of 1959, but did not remember how he got it or from where. The sheath that he was using for the knife was also not the original Mora knife sheath. And when asked, he said again that he did not remember what happened to the original. Police asked him if anyone other than his family members could verify his whereabouts for the winter of 1955. Holmström said he had guests visiting his home, but when the police asked who these guests were, he could not remember their names. Holmström repeatedly denied any involvement in LA's murder. He was never charged with her murder, and there have been no leads or any suspects in the case. It remains unsolved. Cliff Walker was a 25-year-old man who lived with his wife, Christine. They had 2 toddler children, a 3-year-old son named Jimmy and a 1-year-old daughter named Debbie. They lived on Palmer Ranch in Osprey, Florida. On the morning of December 20th, 1959, Daniel McLeod, a neighbor of the Walker family, visited their home. Daniel and Cliff were co-workers and worked on the 100,000 acres of Palmer Ranch. Cliff and Daniel had planned to go hog hunting that day. But upon his arrival to Cliff's home, Daniel noticed the house was dark and eerily quiet. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. He looked around and found the family's car was parked in a different location than it normally was. The front door was locked, but he found a cut Christmas tree and some Christmas presents on the porch. He then went to the back of the home and peered in through the kitchen window. He noticed that the kitchen was dimly lit. Realizing something was wrong, he forced his way into the house through the back door, only to discover a grisly sight. Turning on the lights, he found Christine Walker lying in a pool of her own blood in the doorway to the living room. Looking around, he saw Cliff and Jimmy's body lying next to each other in the corner of the living room. Daniel immediately notified police. Police searched the home and determined that the killer had taken the Walkers' framed marriage license, leading many to speculate that the killer was probably someone who liked Christine. Cliff's pocket knife, a few dollars, and Christine's majorette uniform were also found to be missing from the house. After studying the crime scene, the police were able to put together a timeline of events. Police believed the family was out running errands, and at 4:05 p.m., Christine was the first to arrive back at home. Police believe she parked the car in a different location because there was already a car parked in the usual spot. Christine was not attacked immediately. She had time to hang her handbag up in the kitchen, put away the groceries, and put the Christmas card on the refrigerator that Mrs. McLeod had given her earlier that day. This suggested that Christine knew the killer and probably let him inside the house. The killer probably made advances towards Christine, which she turned down. She was then beaten, taken to Jimmy's bedroom, sexually assaulted, and shot twice in the head. Christine's bloodied high heels were found on the porch, suggesting that Christine fought her killer fiercely. It is believed she escaped her initial attack and ran out the door, but was grabbed and dragged back inside. After murdering Christine, the killer used a quilt to wipe the blood from Christine's legs and dragged her to the living room. Soon after, Cliff returned back home with Jimmy and Debbie. Cliff was shot and killed immediately. Jimmy was shot 3 times in the head. The killer used his last bullet on Debbie, but it appeared she survived. The killer then took her to the bathroom and drowned her in the tub. The only evidence police were able to recover was a bloody cowboy boot, a cellophane strip from a cool cigarette wrapper, and a palm print on the bathtub faucet handle. Initially, Daniel McLeod was considered a suspect, but he was soon cleared after he passed a polygraph test. The other suspect the police looked at was Curtis McCall. McCall had had a history of fighting and violent outbursts. He also owned a .22 caliber handgun, similar to the one used in the Walker family murders. However, he told police he sold the handgun to someone but could not remember the name of the person. There were rumors that Curtis McCall and Christine were having an affair. This info was uncovered after a cousin of Curtis's told police that he was certain he and Christine were in an intimate relationship. During questioning, McCall denied having had an affair with Christine. He was administered a polygraph test 3 separate times, but as McCall was very nervous during the tests, the results were inconclusive. Another suspect was a 65-year-old man named Wilbur Tucker. Tucker had made advances toward Christine in the past and had even tried to kiss her one time. Cliff had threatened to kill Tucker, but he had an alibi. A few months later, 3 women discovered the bloodied clothes of Christine and Cliff, including 2 shirts, a skirt and blouse, pants, and a handkerchief in a nearby shed. It is believed the killer used these items to wipe the blood off of himself after the attacks. In 1962, serial killer Emmett Monroe Spencer confessed to the Walker family murders. However, the police dismissed it as Emmett was a pathological liar. The most promising suspects police investigated were Richard Hickok and Perry Smith. On November 15, 1959, Hickok and Smith murdered the Clutter family in their home in Holcomb, Kansas. This was just 34 days before the Walker family murders. The duo then fled to Florida in a stolen car. The duo was spotted checking into a hotel in Miami Beach, which is about a 4-hour drive from Osprey. The duo checked out in the early morning of December 19th. They were also seen at a Sarasota department store later that day, and a witness said one of them had a scratch on his face. A witness also reported to have seen the duo in Tallahassee, which is 334 miles from Osprey, 3 days after the Walker family murders. Investigators speculate that the pair gained access to the Walker home by pretending to sell their stolen 1957 Chevy Bel Air, a car that Cliff had been wanting to buy. On December 30th, 1959, Hickok and Smith were arrested in Las Vegas. When they were arrested, police found a pocket knife similar to the one that Cliff had owned. They also found children's socks and a toddler's undershirt inside of their stolen car. They were questioned but denied murdering the Walker family. They were given a polygraph test but passed. However, police still believed that they were involved. Hickok and Smith were eventually hanged in 1964 for the murder of the Clutter family. In 1994, a bartender in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, called police and told them that a customer had confessed to killing the Walker family. However, it was never confirmed. In 2012, investigators exhumed Hickok and Smith's body and took a DNA sample. The samples were matched with the DNA samples collected at the crime scene. However, the DNA collected was degraded and deteriorated to the point that the DNA results were deemed inconclusive. Hickok and Smith remain the only viable suspects in the case. There have been no updates in the case since, and it remains unsolved.